Welcome to the WealthStack Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, the Director of WealthStack Content Solutions. And today we're diving into how leading firms are transforming their technology strategies from the inside out and how to build digital infrastructure that actually works for advisors and clients. So I'm thrilled to be joined by JP Pattinson, Chief Information and Digital Officer at MAI Capital Management, who brings a rare 360-degree perspective to the table. And I'll let him tell his side of the story. But JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate you having me.
Long overdue for this conversation. So finally glad to have you on the podcast. But I want to start this conversation with the most challenging question that you will get this entire chat, which is what makes JP, well, JP, both personally and professionally?
Ooh, that's kind of a loaded question, I would say. I think professionally, I'm the type of person that all through my career, when something needs to get done, typically I'm the one that raises my hand and says, I'll get it done. And that's really how I've grown throughout my career, starting, back in the early days, we sat around a Monday morning meeting and small business, things needed to get done. I started to raise my hand, and then I didn't need to raise my hand anymore because people just looked at me and said, you're going to get it done, right? So, I mean, that's from a professional standpoint, that's just how I've always been. And that's how I've grown. Personally, I love to travel. The job I have now allows me to travel a little bit more, which is even better. And I like traveling with my family. We like to go on adventures. We're always planning what the next adventure is during the current adventure that we're on. And I fish, I hunt. You'll find me on the back of my Harley on the weekends when the weather's nice.
Well, certainly well-rounded. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually started out as an advisor, right? Prior to coming into this crazy tech world.
Well, really, I started out 20 years ago as an intern. I turned that internship into a career, a 20-year career now. So from an intern, I began client service, right? Supporting advisors from all facets. I grew into relationship management. So I started to dabble into relationships with clients directly and kind of that middle layer between client service and an advisor. And then for 13 years, I was a wealth manager, right? I had about $100 million book of business and 130 families that I supported and that I advised on. And all throughout my career, it was one of those things where technology was another hat that I wore, right? And that's kind of, I think, a little bit of my special sauce when it comes to the role that I'm in now. And the role that I play is my focus leans heavily into what those client service advisor experiences are and what the end client experience is.
Well, I love that because that's really unique to having started in client service, growing a $100 million practice, and now you're ultimately leading a digital strategy. So how does that experience, say, on the, I would say, front lines, shape the way you approach technology today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives me a different perspective than the traditional technologist, quite frankly. Having a strong understanding of what those complexities and those frustrations are for all the wealth management roles that I mentioned, like frustrations for client service is different than frustrations for advisors. But when I approach technology and solutions and strategy, that really helps me prioritize where the biggest kind of bang for my buck or the biggest impact's going to be made with the solutions that we put out there.
So give listeners just a quick overview then of MAI Capital, who you serve, where the firm's headed, and how technology fits into that growth.
Yeah, that's a good place. MAI is a 50-plus-year-old business. We manage close to $35 billion in assets today. We provide most, I'd say, services within wealth management, from traditional wealth management to sports and entertainment to ultra high net worth clients. We deliver comprehensive financial planning, family office services all across the country for over 30 offices, really. So it's the full breadth of services, which is pretty unique, I think, in the space.
Absolutely. And a 50-year business is no joke. So clearly you guys know what you're doing over there, it seems like.
It's been around for a while, and the growth has been astronomical over the years. We've seen a tremendous amount of growth and success there, but not losing sight of, I'd say, the end client, right, and the service and the delivery that we provide to them.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the background and the context, but I want to actually dive into our first segment that I call Stats All Folks for those Looney Tunes fans out there. And I have two that I want us to unpack and ruminate on a little bit. The first one being around integration priority. Came across a stat that said 68% of advisory firms list modernizing core tech infrastructure as their number one strategic initiative over the next 24 months. And then the other one is around AI adoption, that 74% of wealth management firms are experimenting with AI, but fewer than 30% have a firm wide strategies. So, with stats like that, what's your read on the current state of technology in wealth management? Are firms making real progress, or do you think we're kind of just still scratching the surface a bit?
Honestly, I think it depends on kind of the size and scale. Um, of what of the business, right, and where they are in their maturity from a technology perspective. I think when you talk about core infrastructure, to me, what that says is businesses are still kind of preparing for the next wave of technology, right? And that next wave, we'll get into it, I'm sure, is kind of AI driven. But you need to have that core infrastructure for an AI business to really come to fruition, right? So that to me kind of speaks to that point. And I think that's where people are in the maturity right now. You've got some of the larger RIAs that have been doing the foundational work for the past couple of years, kind of knowing and seeing that this is coming. And then you've got other firms that are just playing catch up.
I would have to agree with you there. And I have to ask, because as someone who's been on either side of the coin, right, as a wealth manager and a technology leader, what's keeping you up at night right now when it comes to delivering on these ever changing client expectations, especially when it comes to technology?
Honestly, for me, it's the pace of play, right? It's the speed that technology is moving, um, and trying to build a team and a culture that can keep up with that pace of play. And then also not getting distracted by um, every little nuance or new piece of technology, new tool, new strategy that's coming, and not being distracted by that, right? And really getting to a point where also building the skill set within the team is important, and I recognize that. So it's all of these things all going back to kind of that pace that technology is doing, and how do we keep up with it? How do we stay on the front end of that?
And I always love asking folks like yourself, because you can really get under the hood when I talk to technologists, because you brought up a good point around culture. And that's something I speak to a lot of folks about, because it really starts from the top down. So, kind of sitting at the forefront of it all, how are you helping drive and maintain that culture of adoption? And like you said, that change of pace at MAI?
I would say the change, like you said, it starts at the top, and we all have to recognize that there at MAI there is a strong appetite to be technology forward, right? And there's a lot of investment going into that, but that change management, that adoption technology is a balancing act, and we have to understand that our users can only consume so much, and probably not at the same pace that leadership wants to really drive. So me kind of being somewhat in the middle there, or kind of a partner to the business, and then, part of leadership as well. Part of my role is helping to prioritize the biggest impact, but then also recognize the change management that needs to go into it.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Actually, you read my mind a little bit, because you've built and scaled tech stacks at two major RIAs now. So, how do you balance the need it now requests versus that longer term vision of where the firm is going?
Yeah, that is a real thing for sure. I think having the management experience that I do complements this, right? Because I can influence leadership and kind of speak from that perspective. It helps a little bit with the blocking and tackling of some of the shiny new object syndrome, like we like to say. And every conference that we go to, there's a new tool, or there's 3 new tools that leadership could come back with and be like, I think we should explore these. But keeping our eye on kind of the longer term prize is really where my focus is. Sometimes you do have to acquiesce and bend to some of the delivery that's needed to accommodate some of the asks. You can't be the house of no. That doesn't work either, and that's not a good way to approach a partnership. But keeping in mind, we're building an enterprise at scale, and that means less of the one-offs and more of the holistic approach.
So, what technology has you excited right now? Let's get into MAI's tech stack a little bit. I always love when we can share with listeners actually what you're using, what's working, kind of what's proving the most ROI. So, get under the hood for us a little bit here.
Yeah. I've been with MAI for just a little over a year, and coming into the organization, I think people recognized there was an appetite and a need for a new kind of foundational piece of the puzzle. So this year we are moving our CRM into Salesforce Financial Services Cloud. So we're in the throes of development into that right now. That to me will become a large part of the foundation of how we execute strategies and adoption in the future, right? We'll build upon this platform. We'll build workflows into the processes, and then build upon AI and agents and digital workforce that can help execute some of those workflows. So to me, that's the foundation. We're getting a lot of success this year in analyzation, business analysis, visualization of data, right? So we've spent the past few years really standing up and maturing our data program with a data warehouse, and expanding upon that. We're getting to the point now this year where we've rolled out a significant amount of dashboards that can track metrics and help the business make better business decisions, or data-driven decisions, I guess, for a better term. And that we're seeing a lot of success in, and that data program is also allowing us to really integrate systems, right, and remove the swivel chair, remove some of the complicated steps of processes, and automate more of that data flow, and that integrated experience.
No, that makes sense. And you're doing it right, because it all starts with that 4-letter word of data. You can't dabble with AI. You can't have the proper systems in place or integrate properly if that data is not cleaned up and you don't kind of have that central source of truth. So I certainly love to hear that. But I want to go back to your point around adoption, because again, things are constantly changing. You're ripping out and putting in a whole new CRM system. So what's worked for you, and getting the rest of the team and your advisors to actually use the tools that you roll out? Is there a training program in place? Kind of what's the standard when it comes to implementing new technology at your firm?
Yeah. You mentioned it. It starts with training, right? Like training is the foundation, I think, to adoption. And it's quickly followed by accountability, right? We can roll out tools, and we can train tools. And I'm a big advocate that when you bring a new tool to the field, there needs to be kind of a process and a procedure around that tool already defined. Otherwise, I've just put another arrow in an advisor's quiver, and whether they pull it or not is to be determined. I think if there's a process that supports it, you'll get better adoption. But then you have to have accountability, and measure that accountability and drive kind of that accountability from the top down. So leadership really needs to be bought in to the process, the procedure, and the tool on how to execute it.
Sure. And I know you've said before that scalability and simplicity don't have to be opposites. So, what are some examples of maybe tech decisions you've made that balance both?
Um, yeah, I think when we talk about scalability and some simplicity, the the conduit right there is consistency, right? And that's really the two things that bring it together. It doesn't have to be one or the other. The consistency really is whether you have a complicated process or a simple process, when you deliver it consistently, regardless of the process, that will provide you scalability. Because at the end of the day, consistency is the foundation to how technology can serve users in the future, right? And that to me is the biggest driving force to that. A good example of that is workflows, and defining a consistent way of doing something. And I say it within our organization all the time. Technology is really well suited when there is consistency. I can deliver one or two ways of doing something, but I can't deliver 30 ways of doing something from a technology perspective. And that's where we have to get to scale the business in an enterprise mindset. You have to have that consistency. And then from there, you can track and optimize your efforts, right? You can track your progress. You can measure against expectations, but all of that's driven by consistency.
I love that. I think you're the first technologist to actually say that. And I hope I'm not misquoting anyone, but I love that concept around consistency because that really is the through line for everything to be able to actually work. So I love that you pointed that out. I want to pivot a little bit to AI because, of course, we have to. It's top of mind across the industry. So curious how MAI is approaching AI, both in terms of internal efficiency and client facing experiences. And what role do you see it playing in your firm's future?
Yeah. I think it is probably the hottest topic around the industry, and I would say it's one of the highest topics that's spoken about within MAI as well today. And it goes back to that pace of play that I mentioned earlier. Where I think you have to start foundationally when rolling out AI, and something that we did is you've got to have kind of a policy, an AI policy that is the foundation of how you use AI tools in the future and how you're going to hold people accountable to this world, because it's a fast-paced world and it's somewhat ungoverned right now, and it's a little bit of a compliance catch, gotcha if you don't do it right, and there's not a lot of direction and guidance around it. So you really need to have that policy to start. We've this year rolled out really the basics, starting small. We're a Microsoft shop, so we've rolled out Copilot with the confines of it, our data being restrictive into our tenant, but allowing people to start to use those tools and all along the ecosystem of Microsoft, or whether it's Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, visualizations, and then even Copilot and Teams, and we are a Teams and a Zoom shop. We kind of do both, more internal Teams and external Zoom. So we enabled Zoom AI, Teams AI to start really that note-taking maturity. And I think that we'll progress into other spaces within that note-taking as we get onto the Salesforce platform. That really becomes the driver of getting success there. So that's where we started. Now, again, I'll go back to Salesforce. As that launches early next year, that's where we'll start to really be able to enable agentic AI, right? And because with that rollout comes consistency, and with that consistency, we can then build agents to help execute on the expected workflows, right? And then we go digital workforce, and we get there. I think there's low-hanging fruits within some of the out-of-the-box tooling that's industry-specific and advisor-specific that we'll be able to take advantage of here in the coming months, which is exciting. But then, it becomes the foundation to where we're going, and it's also going back to kind of what's keeping me up at night. It's staffing for that. It's preparing for what that build is. And really having the people that are AI focused and that live and breathe that on a day-to-day, and all day, every day is really what you need, I think, to execute it at a larger scale. There are smaller businesses can absolutely still take advantage of AI. They'll just need to partner with good people to help execute it. That's all.
Well, and there seems to be just a lot of pressure on firms too, just to do something with AI. But obviously, as you know, not all use cases are equal. So, how do you decide which AI initiatives are worth pursuing versus those that are maybe just more hype than help?
Sure. Now, you have to have a good understanding of what the intended outcome is first, right? You have to understand, you begin with the end in mind is what we like to say. And then that will really help influence, is this an AI thing that helps do this? Or is this just a change in process? What are we trying to solution for? Because people say AI can fix everything or AI can do everything, but that's not always true either. And then that helps determine by what what the end result is the juice really worth the squeeze at that point? Is the level of effort really worth it? And that helps us prioritize from there.
So, do you think 2026 then is the year of the digital worker? Because I might plant my flag in that.
I think by the end of 2026, at least for us, we will be in a place where the digital worker can start to come to fruition. Yeah.
That's a trend I'm certainly excited to follow. But I want to bring up one more, and this one actually came out of our recent CTO think tank. And love you for this because you have participated in several in the past, and then our most recent one here at RIAs. It's one of my favorite things we do because, again, we get to get folks like yourself together in a closed room environment to talk about digital transformation and, again, kind of what's keeping you all up at night. And I feel like we scared everyone to submission around cybersecurity. So have to talk about that one a little bit because obviously it's way more than just a compliance box to check. It's really a strategic priority now for firms. So curious how you're thinking about cybersecurity today and how your approach has maybe evolved as the threat landscape becomes more and more sophisticated, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little fear goes a long way. So let's just start there. That is a good thing. Um, Cybersecurity, yeah, it's a bear, right? And I think the biggest thing um, that I'm seeing is the sophistication of the attacks is becoming more and more. I'd say a lot of attacks are still the same attacks, or same flavor of attacks that we've seen over the past 10 years. I think the bigger concern that I have is the breadth of tools that businesses are taking on. Maybe the lack of transparency to what their users are actually using, right? And not having the controls in place. The amount of those tools and the surface area that is being exposed is so much greater that the impact when and if an attack happens can be much, much larger, right? Because the ecosystem that you're sitting in is so much larger. You then have to have the systems and processes in place to really have that kind of 360 view of your entire ecosystem and monitor your entire ecosystem so that if a bad actor enters, you know where they are, what they're doing and how to block them, immediately. So I think to me, what that speaks to is centralizing a vendor management program, right? I think that maturity is kind of at the forefront of this. Building a comprehensive vendor program is key here. And then leveraging the right tools and processes and procedures to help identify, alert, and systematically block the bad actors from showing up is key.
I think that's great advice. And I want to wrap this segment on maybe a happier note. So we'll wrap this up with a roadmap question. So besides ripping up your CRM, what else is MAA working on when it comes to tech?
The roadmap really, my goal for 2026 is to kind of march around the business, frankly, to all the business units, all the services that we provide, understand the frustrations and the complexities of each one of those, and start to begin to solution for how we improve their overall experiences, right? Because I think technology can do that. I'll go back to consistency as the foundation of that. But we're at the point now where we can lift our heads and be real partners to the business, and be more strategic in nature, and really enable an ecosystem and an environment that empowers people to really do their highest and best use. There's concern about the digital workforce and what that means to my job, and I think people should be less concerned about what that means to their job, quite frankly, and think of it in a positive light to say, how am I going to be able to make an impact that's even more meaningful than I do today, get out of the weeds, and be more proactive, more forward facing, because that's how we'll get success as an industry, as a business, and even down to users' roles.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. But JP, it is time for segment 2 of this episode that I call Ask Us Anything. And as you know, I have gone out to the social universe and asked folks to submit questions they want answered by you. And we did have a few folks slide into the DMs this week. I thoroughly enjoyed reading these questions. So if you're ready for it, I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
All right, let me grab a drink real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, what time is it yet? All right. First one we have for you, JP. I'd love to hear JP's thoughts on what he thinks the tech stack for a firm like MAI will look like in 24 to 36 months. What changes are in motion or likely to mature that will impact the design? Ooh, so thinking ahead.
Yeah, thinking ahead. And sometimes I caution that it's hard to think ahead too far because technology changes every day, right? So what you think you plan for in the next 24 to 36 months most likely is going to change. I think going back to the AI conversation, that's certainly a big component of MAI's tech stack of the future. That you're not going to be able to avoid that. And I think there's a lot of power in there. We're going to need to continue to refine and optimize our data program to support AI as it continues to grow. We continue to focus on security of our data in the new AI world. That's kind of foundational and extremely important. Our data is gold, and I think gaining deep knowledge and understanding of the trends and the outcomes that the data will change the way our business grows, right? So really making better informed data-driven decisions, I think will really lend us to growth in the future. Outside of that, it's going to be exploring where inefficiencies are in the business, like I mentioned, and then we'll look at tools for meeting prep and note taking and tasking that will drastically improve the advisor experience. We all know that that's where advisors tend to fail a little bit, is keeping up with the notes and disseminating those from a transparency standpoint, and tasking and all the meeting follow-up stuff. Advisors are good at meetings and they're good at relationships. It's the little tactical things that tend to bog them down. And then, looking at fund administration and money movement, I think there's opportunities there to vastly improve those processes. And then marketing at scale with deeper knowledge on who our clients are and who we need to be targeting as new prospects. That's going to definitely come to fruition with a more, I'd say, digitized experience for all, right? Digital internal, digital external for our clients. The digital game will lend itself to better data, more rich data, and more clean data. So we'll be able to build upon that.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate the transparency. We have one more question for you. And this listener asked, I'm wondering, how do they prioritize new tech? What's the framework used to decide which projects are most important?
It's a good question. It takes, I'd say, strong synergy with leadership, right? Leadership really has to help drive prioritization. A company-wide strategic plan really helps influence and prioritize our technology efforts. right? So that we know the first and foremost impact that we're going to make is to an overall strategic plan for the business. Those will be kind of the biggest impact plays that we can make. I'd say the day-to-day we'll need to shift, and we'll need to be able to pivot quickly, right? And deliver on those shifts and prioritize those within itself. So it's leadership driven, but we also, part of my role is understanding that day-to-day need and being able to align those with the rest of the priorities.
All right. Well, like I said, you guys have been around for over 50 years, so you certainly have a good system in place. So I appreciate you being put on the spot and your very insightful answers, but we have come to our final and probably the most familiar segment, stack it or whack it. I know you've heard the jokes. So what this segment is all about, I am going to throw out a few technologies. Heck, they might not always even be WealthStack related, sometimes just random concepts, especially if I know you. And you tell me if they are worth the hype or not. So, stack it means you love it, use it, yes, or whack it, lose it, nope, forget about it. So, first one I have for you, all in one, best of breed, building in house. Do you stack or whack one of those over the other?
Holistically, I think it depends on kind of the size and maturity of your firm. For MAI, we'll whack the all-in-one solutions, and we will stack best in breed and building in-house.
All right. I like it. All right. Like I said, these might not always be tech related. So next one I have for you. I know you're a Texas Tech grad, and right now the football team is dominating. So stack or whack the rest of the season.
Stack it for sure. We had a tough loss this weekend, right?
I
Our first of
know.
the season.
I know.
But I believe we're still a strong contender. So yeah, stack it for sure.
All right. I'd have to agree with you there. They're a fun team to watch. So
yeah.
JP, this has just been a really fun and really enlightening conversation. Again, thank you for letting us just get under the hood a little bit. Please tell listeners where they can learn more about you and what you're working on at MAI Capital.
You can reach me on LinkedIn. Pretty active on LinkedIn there. MAI, you can find MAI Capital Management on LinkedIn and also at mai.capital.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major platforms and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and X. Thank you all for tuning in.